March 4, 1945. A cold wind swept across the flat Texas plains as dawn crept in, blue and bruised, over rows of wooden barracks. The smell of diesel hung in the air, mixed with the dust kicked up by the night patrol. Somewhere beyond the perimeter fence, cattle lowed in the distance. A reminder that even in wartime this land had belonged to ranchers long before it held prisoners. Boots crunched on gravel. A truck engine idled, its rattling cough slicing through the morning quiet. Inside the vehicle sat nearly 24 German women, exhausted, pale, shivering under thin coats that had traveled with them from ships and trains across a continent they did not understand. The engine cut. Silence fell heavy. A guard stepped forward, coat buttoned to his throat, hat brim shadowing his eyes. He raised a clipboard, expecting to shout orders, but stopped when he saw the faces staring back at him, terrified, hollow-cheeked, clutching small bundles of belongings as if they might be taken from them at any moment. He lowered his voice. "Please," he said simply. "Follow me." In that moment, their fear collided with an impossible contradiction. They had braced for humiliation. Instead they heard courtesy. And the story that follows began not with cruelty, but with restraint. The women hesitated at the truck's edge. One by one they climbed down, boots sinking into the cold Texas dirt. The wind tugged at their dresses and the dust stung their eyes. A second guard nodded toward a long wooden building, heat rising from its roof in ripples as if the sun were already burning behind the clouds. Inside the room was warmer. Quiet. Lanterns flickered against the walls, illuminating metal tubs, steam rising like ghostly curtains. A nurse in a khaki uniform moved between tables, preparing supplies with efficient hands. Bars of soap, towels, folded clothing, small vials marked only with numbers. The women stiffened. They understood. Intake procedure. Medical inspection. Back home, such moments could mean degradation, exposure, shame. A third guard, older, mustache trimmed to regulation, stepped forward. His tone held no threat. Only procedure. "Ladies, you'll change into clean camp garments for disinfection," he said. "You'll have privacy. No one will touch you. No one will watch." The word privacy caught them off balance. Nothing in their journey so far had included kindness. A young woman whispered to another, voice breaking, "Why are they being gentle?" But procedure continued, calm and measured. 3 female nurses guided them toward curtained stalls, thick canvas partitions hung on wooden frames. Behind those barriers, the women performed what they feared most, but in safety, removing their lice-ridden clothing, placing garments into labeled sacks for steam sterilization, washing with warm water poured from buckets that didn't run out. They expected violation. Instead they found dignity. A nurse handed each of them a clean cotton shift, a towel still warm from the stove, and a soft reassurance, "You're safe here." For the first time in days, some of the women exhaled through tears. If this moment already changed how you see the war, subscribe, the next will surprise you even more. Their story did not begin in Texas. It began across the Atlantic, under the collapsing weight of a war that had consumed Europe whole. These women, seamstresses, farmhands, clerks, nurses, mothers, had been swept up in the final months of the conflict. When Allied troops advanced through Germany and France, many civilians found themselves caught between front lines, trapped behind retreating forces, or detained as potential laborers or collaborators. In the chaos, some were placed in transport groups bound for internment in Britain or the United States. Not as criminals, not as soldiers, but as displaced persons who needed containment under wartime law. Their capture was quiet, almost administrative. A checkpoint, a name written down, a hurried order to board a truck. They left behind homes still smoldering, families scattered by the war's final storms. They did not know where they were going. Only that they were not going home. The journey was long. First came the trains, overcrowded cars of wooden benches and bitter breath, rolling across the wrecked shell of Europe. They traveled for days beneath shattered bridges and past silent towns. At night, the darkness was broken only by the hum of the engine and the clacking of wheels against tracks. Then came the ship. A Liberty vessel riding rough waves, escorted by destroyers that cut the ocean like knives. The deck smelled of fuel and brine. The women stayed below with metal bunks and thin blankets, listening to the churn of engines and the distant call of gulls. Crossing the Atlantic should have felt like escape. Instead, it felt like suspension, a life between two worlds, neither of which belonged to them anymore. "We drift like leaves," one wrote on a scrap of paper. "The sea carries us and none of us knows where." Texas was the answer. Arrival brought shock. The heat hit them like a fist. The sky was impossibly vast, a blue that seemed to swallow them whole. The camp was fenced but open to the horizon, guarded but not harsh. American soldiers moved with quiet efficiency, their accents unfamiliar, their expressions unreadable. The intake building, warm, orderly, lit by lantern light, was their first moment of stillness. And their first moment of fear softening into something else. After the washhouse, the women were given warm broth, slices of soft bread, and cups of weak coffee that tasted like luxury to those who hadn't known warmth in weeks. The nurses treated them like wounded travelers rather than enemies. One soldier carried a heavy tub for an elderly woman whose legs trembled under the strain. "A moment," he said, adjusting the weight. "I've got it." She clutched her chest, stunned. Not by force. By gentleness. Life settled into routine. Wake before sunrise. Stand for roll call under the broad Texan sky. Work assignments varied. Cleaning barracks, tending gardens, mending uniforms, preparing meals. Food was plain but steady. Thick soups. Hard bread softened in broth. Occasionally, when supplies allowed, a slice of apple or a spoonful of beans. The women relearned normal rhythms. Washing laundry in wooden basins, hanging garments on lines that stretched like white flags across the yard, sweeping dust that returned with every gust of wind. One morning, a guard set down a small tin box near their barracks. For letters, he explained. Outgoing mail would be censored and delayed, but it would still travel. The women stared at the box as though it were a relic from another life. "I had forgotten what hope felt like," one wrote. The first true gesture of humanity came days later. During a dust storm, when wind hammered the barracks and sand stung exposed skin, the guards passed out heavy wool blankets, clean, warm, smelling faintly of cedar. Some women hesitated. They had been taught not to trust. Then a soldier knelt before an elderly internee whose hands shook violently. He draped the blanket around her shoulders with a careful, almost reverent touch. "You're all right," he said softly. The old woman burst into tears. "America is different," she wrote that night. "Not soft. Not cruel. Something in between, something human. To understand this, one must step back. Behind every gesture lay policy, the Geneva Convention guidelines that the United States had adopted long before the war began. A memo pinned in the administrative office, dated 1940, summarized it simply: prisoners are soldiers, not slaves. And though these women were civilians, not combatants, the same philosophy applied. Security, diplomacy, morality. A triad that shaped every camp. The guards followed rules not because they were sentimental, but because law demanded dignity, even when war demanded blood. Daily life revealed this truth slowly. Children born in the camp took their first steps on Texan soil. Women formed small communities exchanging skills. Baking, sewing, reading scraps of English newspapers. An afternoon scene, a guard showing a photograph of his horse to a group of women. They leaned in, fascinated. Not by the animal, they knew horses, but by the simple fact that he wanted to share something personal. Another evening, an internee humming a lullaby. A soldier paused outside the barracks to listen. For a moment, the camp held its breath. Fear dissolved not in grand gestures but in thousands of small ones. A young seamstress was assigned to mend uniforms. She stitched quietly at a wooden table near the open door. One guard, noticing her skill, brought her a pair of gloves torn at the seams. She repaired them as if they belonged to a brother she had not seen in years. "I held the fabric," she wrote, "and remembered I once had a life." A former schoolteacher taught children in the shade of a barracks wall, writing letters in the dirt with a stick. A soldier passed by, paused, then returned with a small box of chalk taken from the storage shed. He set it down without a word and walked away. She held the chalk as if it were treasure. A pregnant woman struggled to stand during roll call. A guard discreetly marked her as present each morning without making her step into the cold. "Compassion," she later wrote, "is sometimes best seen when no one notices." Cultural walls, built by propaganda and fear, softened. Stories traded across fences revealed truths that contradictions could no longer hide. The women learned that Texas was not a land of cruelty, but of straight talk and steady hands. One day, a guard apologized for mispronouncing a woman's name. She laughed, the sound startling them both. Another day, a group of internees baked small rolls from leftover flour and shared them with the guards. Another evening, a soldier showed a woman how to say, "thank you" in English. She repeated it with hesitant cadence until her voice found new certainty. If you're seeing this war in a new light, subscribe. The next scene will challenge you even more. On Christmas Eve, the camp was quiet. A harmonica played softly near the guardhouse, slow, melancholy tunes drifting across the yard like smoke. Inside the women's barracks, someone lit a candle stub saved from transport crates. Its glow illuminated a circle of faces, each reflecting the same fragile peace. They shared coffee. They shared silence. They shared a moment without fear. A soldier passing by paused at the doorway. He removed his hat, nodded, and continued his rounds. No speeches. No celebrations. Just recognition of humanity on a night meant for remembering what was lost, and what might still be saved. When the war ended, the camp did not erupt in joy. It exhaled. News arrived on a thin sheet of paper, read aloud by an officer whose voice carried across the yard. The women listened, hands pressed to mouths, tears carving tracks through dust. Some would return to Germany. Others had no home left to return to. Repatriation came slowly. Trucks rolled into the yard. Bundles were gathered. Names checked. Goodbyes were awkward, quiet, incomplete. A woman pressed a hand to her heart and bowed. A guard touched the brim of his hat. A seamstress left behind a pair of mended gloves. A teacher left the chalk. An elderly woman pressed a small embroidered cloth into a nurse's hands. By 1947, thousands had returned across the Atlantic. Others stayed temporarily until families could be found. Some never reunited with those they loved. But all of them remembered Texas. The story ends where it began. The intake hall, the curtain, the fear of exposure, the expectation of humiliation. A moment when everything could have gone wrong, but didn't. They were told to undress. They expected shame. They found safety instead. The difference was not softness. It was discipline. It was law. It was a choice made every day by ordinary soldiers who understood that civilization must hold, even when the world falls apart. If this story reshaped your understanding of war, subscribe. There are more human truths still waiting to be uncovered. The war had taught them fear. The peace taught them mercy.